50 years is just something to be so proud of because you don't hear about it very often.
50 years is, wow.
They still are interested in communicating to each other.
50 years, it's a long time.
You guys have definitely hit a huge milestone.
I think that they have just a beautiful love story.
Theirs is a love that's blossomed over time.
We were compatible, we kind of fit.
A developed love that grew from truly liking each other.
I loved talking to her on the phone. I'd talk hours and hours and hours with her.
I've just loved this man from just before we were engaged. There's so many things I love about him. He is, to me, so intelligent. He's got me beat.
And he was drawn to her strength.
She's got spark. That's what I love about her.
Well,
nobody's going to walk on her.
I'm not a person that will be intimidated. I won't be bullied. And maybe that comes from my grandma Toland, because she demanded respect.
Well, your mother had a very stubborn streak, like you do.
The only job that I absolutely hated in my life was Fred Morton's insurance company. Now, and let me tell you why. That was an awful job. I remember I had my own desk, and and I'd go to lunch or whatever, and I would go into my desk and it looked like it had been rifled. My purse looked like somebody had been into my purse, and you know that yourself. You know pretty much what you have in there. And so I asked one of the gals and I said, well, this is going to sound crazy, but it looks like somebody's been on my desk and my purse. And she says, oh yes, Mr. Mortensen, he comes in and he'll check your desk to make sure how many paper clips you use, if you're sharpening your pencils too much, how many pads of paper you use. And I said, don't tell me. And I said, I'm done.
She's got a mind of her own. I never want to put a damper on that. She speaks her piece, and I think that's important for a woman, to be able to speak her piece.
And learning to speak her mind began on March 6, 1942, when Patsy K. Anderson was born to Dale Anderson and Carrie Tolan in Salt Lake City, Utah. Carrie didn't waste any time grooming her daughter into becoming a lady.
Well, I was a hothouse plant. I really was. I didn't go out and play an awfully lot because she would have me dressed up in ruffles and organdies, and she would curl my hair with rags. They used to do that years and years ago, and I had these ringlets that were just the cute, and big bows on top of my head. And so I really didn't go out a lot. I liked to play hopscotch when I could get by with it. Or, jacks. You'd sit on the floor and play jacks. She was very particular about that and the way I looked. They had me enrolled in a dance class, and we did a lot of performances, and my mother made all of my costumes.
Pat grew up close to her parents. She was the youngest of their 3 children. She had 2 older brothers. The oldest died before she was born.
We were very, very loved, in our home.
And she loved going to the movies with her mother and spending time with her father.
I could be a real scamp when I was younger, and my dad taught me, once you lose your credibility, you've lost everything of value.
She took those words of wisdom with her as she entered high school.
I had a very good time in high school, and I had very good friends. And they weren't always the popular girls. I had close friends. I just really had a good time in high school. I had to work because I had to help with my education. I worked for Erickson Pharmacy, and I worked behind the counter. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. And my boss didn't always thoroughly enjoy it because my friends would come in, and he would say, "You're here to work," not to, talk with your friends. But, he was a great boss.
She graduated in 1960 and made her way to Brigham Young University in Provo before choosing to finish her schooling at the Henniger's Business School in 1962.
It was important to me.
Why?
To have that degree, because I feel that knowledge is power. And to have that knowledge of business, that's what I did. And I was able to get some very good jobs. I worked for Hoffman Electronics Corporation in California, and then American Oil when I came back to Salt Lake.
After leaving college, Pat chose to teach dance classes at the Arthur Murray School of Dance in Salt Lake before taking off with a coworker to live in California in 1964. She quickly found work in a town on the outskirts of Los Angeles.
They were just on the ground floor of computers. The computers at that time were 6 feet tall. Barely get them through into rooms.
She loved her time in California, but felt it was important to please her mother by moving back to Salt Lake City in 1966. And that's where she met Darryl Colton, her future husband.
My mother knew Kay Colton. She was a friend of hers. So she asked me, she said, I want you to take a birthday gift down to her. So I did. And they lived at the very end of Hartford Street, the same street that we lived on. And so I went down there and I brought this gift, and Kay Colton opened the door and she said, well, I'd like you to meet my son. He came to the door and introduced himself because I really didn't want to go in. But I thought, that he was very, very attractive. But I didn't think any more about it. And the next thing I know, he called me on the phone, told me I had bought a Mustang. And he talked about he wanted a car like that. Then he told me later he wasn't interested in the car at all. It was me he was interested in. We went for a ride in the Mustang and everything. And then he asked me out.
He still remembers what he thought the first time he laid eyes on Pat when he was 30 years old.
Oh, I'm interested in that girl.
He'd already lived a lifetime, been to war, and had become a teacher. But first, on July 11th in 1937, he was born to Frank Colton and Kay Lind in Vernal, Utah. He had one older sister. This family of four moved to Salt Lake City when Darryl was 5. The war paved the way for his father to get a job in the defense industry. He took high school seriously, and upon graduating in 1955, he entered the University of Utah to get a degree in teaching. In 1960, a new college graduate, he was drafted to go to war.
But I was fortunate in a couple of things is because of my college background. They pulled me out and put me in some special training and sent me in a good place.
In 1961, he was shipped off to Heidelberg, Germany.
Heidelberg was a unique place. It was one of the few places that was not destroyed through the bombing of the Second World War. Heidelberg was an old university city, probably one of the oldest in Germany. So you had that university experience there. We loved to go to the Red Ox. The Red Ox was a tavern. Was made famous in the old musical The Student Prince. We loved to go in there because you could hoop la la, sing, and kind of a crossroads for all of the tourists that would come through Heidelberg. They'd come in on the busloads and go out on the busloads every day. We were sent to Germany as a special attachment to the U.S. Army to the Sink. That's the Commander-in-Chief of the Uster Army. That is the main U.S. Army for all of Germany and Eastern Europe, mostly. We used to have the general come in to our office once a week, usually. We never knew about it. He would come in for briefings. One night, the Sink was in our office in his pajamas. On the other end of the line was Kennedy, and they were at that point where they needed to test access to East Germany because the Russians were kind of setting barricades. And it was decided that if they stopped us, we went anyway. So that was kind of critical toward a war breaking out. It's the last thing you want is another war.
He loved his time in Germany, and being in the military was good for him.
Well, I like things in order. I'm a fairly ordered person. My clothes were all hanging in the right direction, and my socks were all lined up in the drawer.
He stayed in Germany for 18 months before returning home at the age of 25 to take a teaching job in Ogden.
My dad was a teacher for 40 years, and on and off throughout those years, be brought to work as a small kid, even up to a teenager and all that, visit him in the classroom, and I would see his passion for teaching these kids, and you would see their, some teachers' kids would probably be half asleep, but with my dad, it's like they're just into it, if they were into the art. And that was just exciting. And so I'd like seeing, him teach in his element and all that. That's the thing that I remember pretty memorably about my dad.
Darryl had been teaching for 5 years when he met the girl of his dreams, Pat, and their first date was definitely memorable.
I got very sick that night. I think that was too stressful for me.
And there was a sky room there. It was just a very exclusive restaurant. So we went up to the sky room and we were having our dinner, and all of a sudden, Darryl excused himself, didn't think anything of it, but he just didn't come back to the table. And I sat there and I sat there and I thought, well, was it my breath or do I have spinach on my teeth? Where did he go? And I sat there about 20, 25 minutes. And it wasn't something that you could leave the table because the bill had to be paid. And I thought, what am I going to do? And so I have always, when I went out, I always had a little mad money, if you will, for a telephone call. We didn't have cell phones, smartphones. You just had, a public phone. And I thought, what am I going to do? I'm going to have to call my dad. He's going to have to come down, pay this bill. But all of a sudden, Darryl came back to the table. And I wanted to ask him, well, did you fall in? Did you pass out? Were you kidnapped? And, and I hadn't let the waiter take his food from the table. I thought, as long as I've got the food on the table, maybe I can just hold out. You see what I mean? And so he came back. He looked relieved, but like he had been through some stress. And so he finished his meal, and he couldn't get me out of there fast enough. So we drove home. He took me up to the door. He gave me a peck on the cheek. He was down those steps like he was in a relay race. And I thought, oh, well, that went well. I thought, probably won't be seeing him again. But I was just glad he came back to the table so he could pay, the bill. You know what I mean? And the tip. And the very next morning, he showed up. I thought, you leave me at the table for a half hour, and the next morning, I wasn't even out of bed when he showed up. Well, what had happened, he'd forgotten his wallet. So he had gone to call his dad to bring him some money down to that Hotel Utah. Well, his dad wasn't there. They didn't answer. So he called my dad, told him the situation, and so all the time that I was waiting at the table, he was waiting in front of the Hotel Utah for my dad to come and hand him because he couldn't get his wallet, but my dad gave him some money so he could pay this bill. And so if I'd have called my dad, he wouldn't have been there anyway, because he was on his way down to the hotel. And I didn't even know this till the next day. And if anything, my dad just thought Darryl was the greatest. I don't know what it did, but my dad loved him to the day that he died.
6 weeks later, they were engaged.
We were at the
Paprika.
And we were sitting at the table.
And what did he say to you? What do you remember?
Golly, I can't remember that. What did you say?
I can't remember. I told her I did have a ring.
he had the ring that I'm wearing now. He just asked me to marry him. Well, I was thrilled. You know, I really was.
They were married on July 13th, 1967 in Salt Lake.
I gave her the longest kiss in the world.
It really was. It was held at Memory Grove, and it was a fun wedding.
Dancing. We did dancing.
We had a combo there. I mean, it was like a party. It was wonderful. And I felt so good about him.
2 years later, on November 28th, 1969, they had their first baby boy. They named him Kirk.
It's kind of scary, you know, because you think, how come they don't have college for new mothers? You know, because, you know, there's just a lot that goes into it. But, it was just a wonderful, wonderful experience. And we brought him back as a newborn to an apartment. And the apartment we brought him back is across Harrison.
Oh, he was my apple.
I'm very lucky that I've had parents that have supported me through super tough times, and my brothers through super tough times, and of course celebrated our accomplishments and all that. So through the bad times and the good times, they've been there. But also the fact that, like, my dad's more of the cerebral type, and my mom's more of the emotional type, and I think that having those two elements are really kind of sometimes enables me to be a little bit more balanced.
On April 30th, 1973, they added Kyle to the family.
If we came from a dysfunctional, non-loving family, I don't think we would have turned out to be the adults that we are.
Kip joined the family on March 14th, 1978, followed by the birth of Keegan on December 29th, 1980.
We were extremely lucky to have a stay-at-home mom. As I got older, having a stay-at-home mother, coming home from school in kindergarten and first grade and having her there to help with my homework and things, and I always felt like Mother was such a hard-working mom.
Kendall was their fifth and final son, born on January 9th, 1984.
Having my mom's just so sweet and caring and nurturing and compassionate and was always there. And same thing with my dad. He was always there, but just being able to learn from him, and they fill every aspect that I would need.
We had a minor basketball team, 5 boys.
As parents, they loved their boys. Their life revolved around guiding them through childhood.
I loved to have my kids go with me when I'd do home errands.
Going for drives was a big part, I think, of all of our upbringing.
And I always had a couple of kids in the back seat, always. They didn't require that we put everybody in a car seat and all of that in those years.
It was a more carefree life, but then tragedy struck, shaking them to their very core. Pat got a call from Primary Children's Medical Center saying Kip had been struck by a truck while crossing a busy street in Bountiful. He did not make it.
I was never the same. I've never been the same, and I've never thought the same. And it's not always a good thing, but your grief it just goes on. I mean, there's just not very many minutes that I don't think about that kid, and obviously.
I never got over the loss of my middle child, so that stands out, obviously. Something I've learned to live with, but it still hurts.
Even with all of the trials and the tribulations, just try to get on with life. I mean, it is hard. It is hard. But to just, persevere. And when he was gone, part of my heart was gone.
To help ease their grief, Darryl designed and built a home in Ogden, moving his family to a new place where they could begin to rebuild emotionally as a family.
How he designed this house. And you know, that takes a lot. In fact, I think, didn't one of the builders said that architects don't have as good a specs as that you had? Is that
Well,
correct?
when I turned my blueprints in for approval at the city, they were pretty immaculate. But I spent hours upon hours. I've never learned good CAD skills on the computer because I'm from the old school. I'd rather pick up a pen, a pencil, and draw a line.
In their new home, they wanted to feel love.
And they always supported each other. And probably when Kip died, and most families would probably be ripped apart, and they kept it together. They've always kept us together.
There was still like a real comfort in the home because, you know, my parents were, you know, both loved each other, loved their kids, but tried to have a harmonious household and raise their kids. And
Giving everything that has happened to this family with the tragic loss of our brother Kip, and seeing them work through that and stay together and continue to love each other and give us all the love and attention that we deserved.
Having the solid backbone as solid parents that we were lucky to have, that were very smart, very wise. And that, you know, you might have drama or negativity within a family, but, you know, that's the stuff that really brings you together, because if you fight through something, and you become stronger because of it. So.
And in this loving environment, they continue to work on their personal connection with each other, even choosing to attend a marriage seminar to help them learn how to communicate more effectively.
Darryl and I went through Marriage Encounter. I believe I was pregnant with Keegan at the time. And that was a wonderful experience. And after we got through with that, we remarried again. We had a Protestant minister remarry us, and so we've actually had 2 ceremonies.
Dude, I'm so glad you asked me this, because I recently talked to your mom, because I asked her that, and she said communication and hard work.
We learned to do 10-10s, which is writing down for 10 minutes things that maybe are bothering you about that person. And then they will reply with writing down something where you're just not, where maybe bickering could start to happen. So you write it down.
And it's funny because it's like, that is so true, especially like the communication. And I think that must be a huge reason. And that's kind of taking her words, you know, but I mean, I think too that they're both just like really good people.
Partnership, honesty, loyalty, and family, and they know what family bond is about.
Don't let your conflicts go without being resolved within a couple of days. You need to come back. And my wife and I have had our conflicts, but we've always come back within, at the most, 2 days, if not a day. You have to come back to what you really think about each other, your love.
They saw a vision of probably what they wanted out of their life. And so I think for them it was like seeing things in the big picture.
Let things go, you know, not have confrontations. And I think a lot of people, they just need to do that. Just say, I'm not going to make a big issue of this.
And love to Darryl means loyalty.
You have to be loyal to each other. Loyalty. Marriage is built more on loyalty than it is on whatever love is. Love is a very deep thing. It's not a shallow thing. Now, those are kind of old school values.
Traditional, old school, just, you know, works always. And that's why it has worked, you know.
Values that led to many fun family traditions.
I'd say Christmas, Darryl would always read the night before Christmas. Do you remember that at all?
Yeah.
Okay.
When the kids were younger.
When they were little. And I used to love to go Halloweening with these guys. And I would dress up too, wouldn't I?
Mm-hmm.
I think the secret to their marital success kind of extends from when they were first dating, and that is that they would talk hours upon hours to each other on the phone. They're approaching their 50-year wedding anniversary, and every day they're talking sometimes hour upon hour about stuff.
Family's the most important, and our children are the most important, and that no matter what, who comes in and out of our life, that we always have family, and I know Kendall would agree with me.
I think it's a lot of things, but just trying to listen and always be there, and I guess just the little things. I don't know. Probably be a better question to ask them. So
She's always been by my side, very loyal.
His gentleness. You know, I never cared for the macho, never did. And there was just something about him. He was just a gentle person, and he was a good person. And I loved him then, and I love him now.
Theirs is a love story still in the making, 50 years later.
You can't say that you could have any better parents. Thank you for dealing and supporting us through all the BS that we put you through. And know that it's not all for naught. We are going to come out of it even stronger as a family.
Just want you to know I love you both very, very dearly. I'm glad that you raised us the way that you did. I think that we all made it out. We made it out pretty well.
congratulations. I'm so excited for you guys making it 50 years. Couldn't ask for better parents, a better mother, better father. Just super lucky and super happy to have you guys. 50 years is amazing, so it's awesome.